let's continue with muscle on slide 46, cross training and deconditioning. Remember, cross training is important using both aerobic and anaerobic exercise um, to increase the strength and the oxygen delivery system of muscles. And remember, muscles atrophy, they're not used. And the last thing I want to say about skeletal muscle is how much ATP it uses. Uh, Males have a higher metabolic rate than females because we have higher amounts of skeletal muscle, and it just uses a tremendous amount of ATP. Remember, skeletal muscle uses ATP when it's contracting to reposition the cross bridge. It uses ATP when it's relaxing. How does it do that? Well, you have to turn on calcium ion pumps in the sarcoplasmic reticulum to resequester calcium after contraction. And even when muscle isn't doing anything, it's just sitting there, it uses ATP because your cerebellum is contracting motor units randomly to maintain muscle tone. So skeletal muscle is always using ATP, lots and lots of it. Okay, let's go to cardiac muscle. We're just going to talk a little bit about cardiac muscle, found only in the heart, connected electrically by gap junctions. It's involuntary, it's autorhythmic, it's striated, which is similar to skeletal muscle, and it's almost exclusive aerobic. Um, Skeletal muscle can use anaerobic uh, uh, sources of ATP, but your heart is almost exclusively aerobic. It's very dependent upon getting oxygen. Okay, slide 47 is a blow up of cardiac muscle cells. They're very different than skeletal muscle cells. They're branched, they're Y-shaped. They only have one nucleus, and they have gap junctions. So they're electrically connected directly to each other. While that's completely different from skeletal muscle cells are completely electrically isolated from each other. And skeletal muscles, uh, skeletal muscle cells are slaves to the motor neuron. They don't contract unless the motor neuron sends them an action potential. But cardiac muscle cells are autorhythmic. They have leaky sodium ion channels, and they will spontaneously contract at different rates. And we'll talk a lot more about that all this next semester. Okay, moving on to smooth muscle. It's a fusiform shape, um, not long cylinders, not Y-shaped. They're uninuclear. There's no sarcomeres, Z discs, T tubules, and really scanty SR. This is it's true for cardiac muscle a little bit. Cardiac muscle has more SR, and of course it's striated. But smooth muscle and cardiac muscle are more dependent upon calcium coming from the outside, and doesn't have this big calcium storage area inside the cell, which skeletal muscle does, the SR. And smooth muscle is really different from cardiac and skeletal because it's capable of mitosis and hyperplasia. It can regenerate, and you can make new uh, smooth muscle cells. There's two basic types. The more uncommon type is called multi-unit, found in piloerector muscles, which is the muscles that useless muscles that cause goose flesh, iris, large arteries, and pulmonary air passages. Its innervation is similar to skeletal muscle in that it has motor units that act independent of each other, and these are slaves to the motor neuron, just like skeletal muscle cells. Slide 49 are um, um, some pictures of what smooth muscle looks like and how they're arranged. They have thick filaments, but no Z discs, no H zones, and so on and so forth. And they are connected by these thin and thick filaments that are connected to what are called dense bodies. And when they contract in a twisted shape. Okay, slide 50, getting back to the different types of smooth muscle. Single unit, much more widespread, found in most blood vessels, the digestive, respiratory, urinary, reproductive tracts. Each cell is electrically connected to each other via gap junctions, and the whole muscle acts as one. So in this way, it's similar to cardiac muscle. And the stimulation is, smooth muscle is completely involuntary. And it can be activated by other things besides nerves, hormones, the presence of how much CO2, pH, O2, stretch, um, all of things can affect the stimulation of smooth muscle when none of those really affect the contraction of skeletal muscle. Uh, Cardiac muscle is also similar in that it's involuntary, and it can be contracted by hormones and stretch. But smooth muscle has no synapses. They're called varicosities and diffuse junctions or caveoli. Um, Let me show you that in the next slide. Okay, so slide 51 showing single unit um, smooth muscle. We have multi-unit to the left. We have synapses going to each muscle cell, just like in skeletal muscle. But the more common, the single unit type, there's one line of these synaptic vesicles that are coming along, and they don't really form synapses. And the neurotransmitter is more like acting like uh, uh, like a paracrine here, a local hormone, and it stimulates the cells near the autonomic motor neuron. Remember, smooth muscle is innervated by the autonomic nervous system, not the somatic nervous system. That's true for cardiac muscle as well. But these other cells are all connected via gap junctions, and even though they're not right next to the nerve, these cells will stimulate the neighboring cells to fire. So they fire as one big unit.